We're on air. Fantastic. Thank you. So, welcome to the City of Lacombe Council regular meeting. It is February 13th. Some of the keen observers in the room may notice something a little bit different today. No, it's not Benjamin Button. I'm not a younger Mayor Creasy, so I will be filling in as Deputy Mayor today. And it is 5:30, so we will get started, and I will call this meeting to order. We have all had access to the agenda. In regards to the consent agenda, are there items we would like removed? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I would like to remove the Lacombe Public Library board minutes, please, from the consent agenda.
Thank you. In regards to that, I can just pull them and move them to section 6.4. Is that correct? Yep. Okay, sounds good. We'll move the library minutes to item 6.4. Is there anybody else with anything on this? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. I would like to move the consent agenda as amended.
Great, thank you. One last time around the room here, and then we'll wait for the motion on the screens. And we'll do things a little bit differently today. We will just wait for all the motions to be displayed on the screen, and we will do them all digitally. Okay. Is there only 5 of us? Okay, great, fantastic. Okay, all 5, that's unanimous, thank you. All right. Next up, the regular agenda. Is there any additions or changes we would like made on that? Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. I'd like to add a notice of motion, please.
Okay. Thank you. Notice of motion will be added into section 7. Okay. All right. Anybody else? No. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do not have any further additions, so I would move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Great, thank you. Anyone else while we wait for the motion to be displayed on the screen? Vote is ready. Okay, again, that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we will be moving along quickly here now then. There is no open forum tonight, or I guess nobody here for that, so okay, thank you. So we will start off with presentations in section 4. First up, we have the Parkland Regional Library System annual update, and Director Ron Shepard will be presenting for that. So welcome and thank you for attending. Once you're seated, I would just like to remind you to use the microphone and push the button once the red light is displayed. Feel free to begin. Okay, we appreciate it. Thank you.
He's not here.
Can you hear me all right? So I did provide a couple of very small modifications, mostly typos, to the presentation that you have in your package compared to the one that is on the screen. So actually, first of all, thank you very much for having me. This is certainly a change from the budget presentations, which I have had to do in the past. And what Guy, Mr. Lapointe, had asked me to do is provide an overview of the various activities that Parkland has been involved in over the last year, and some of the highlights about the burgeoning issues that are affecting the library world. So I'm happy to talk about that. If I get this thing to work right. Okay. So right at the very beginning here, what is Parkland? Parkland Regional Library System. So we're one of 7 regional library systems in Alberta. We are a municipal cooperative. We're board run. So we're not in any way an agency of government. We're not a provincial agency. We're nothing like that. And our whole purpose is to provide service. And what we try to do is provide, in the same way that you would have a place like Edmonton that has its headquarters unit and then has a whole bunch of branches. Well, we don't have branches because our libraries are autonomous, but we still need to put the same kind of services that a headquarters unit would into all of those libraries. We have 64 member municipalities. And you can see our system here, and those are the 7 systems that you can see on that provincial map. That's actually taken directly from the regulation, the library's regulation. Right now, we only have 2 very small municipalities, the village of Halkirk and the summer village of Burnstick Lake, with a combined population of 113 that could still join our system. That, and of course, the big one, the city of Red Deer, but they're so large and they are sufficiently big enough to operate on their own. And the system boundaries are set by legislation. And just so you're aware, you'll see that there are 2 little sort of blobs there, one between the Yellowhead system and Northern Lights, that's Edmonton. And then a little further down, one smack dab in the middle of the Marigold system to the south of us. Those are Edmonton and Calgary, because under the legislation, they're the only 2 municipalities in Alberta that cannot join a library system. So some quick facts. So we were formed in 1959. We're the oldest of the 7 library systems. And of course, some of you may know that our headquarters was adjacent to this building, just immediately to the east of here. We currently have a service population of over 226,000. And we also have over 14,000 population that we're serving on 6 First Nations reserves. 24,000 square kilometer service area. Again, we've got 64 member municipalities. If I can get this to work. There we go. 64 member municipalities, so that's the most members in the province. We have 48 public libraries plus a library service at Maskwacis, which serves the 4 First Nations reserves in that area. We have 45 participating public library boards, and again, that's the most public libraries and public library boards in the province. And right now, we operate with a 21 full-time staff complement and 6 part-time staff, plus 2 more staff that are working at the service point in Maskwacis. So some more quick facts, and these statistics are taken from 2022, because right now we're just in the process of trying to finalize our annual report for last year, which we have to submit to the government. So there are over 678,000 items in our system catalog, so that's in all of the libraries. Last year we had over almost 24,000 interlibrary loans. Now that is not the volume of materials that's moving between the libraries within Parkland. That is simply what is being brought in from outside of Parkland. So that can include post-secondary institutions, Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, the other library systems, and then materials that we're shipping out that are being borrowed from Parkland libraries. Our vans do over 3,100 deliveries a year, so they're very busy traveling throughout the region. And we're starting to see some recovery from the downturn in services that resulted from the COVID shutdowns. So you'll see that the circulation statistics for last year, I mean, maybe this is terribly boring to you, but it excites me to no end. But we had over 1.2 million items circulated within Parkland. So again, that's throughout the entire region and all of those 49 service points. Card holders are still down a little bit. That's only a little over 38,000. But what you often see is one person in the family will have a library card and then everybody uses that same card. And it doesn't detract from the number of people who are actually using the library. And what it works out to, and I just threw that down there, is about 33 items checked out per card holder, or I prefer a little over 5 items per person, that's per resident, out of over 140,000 service population, or 240,000 service population throughout the region. So governance, library systems as well as public libraries are all established under the Alberta Libraries Act and Regulation, not under the MGA, the Municipal Government Act. They are equal forms of legislation, but they are distinct from one another. Parkland is formed by members to the agreement, so we have a master agreement. And the big thing I always try to emphasize, because it's not always understood, particularly, I know Lacombe has a much better idea of this than many places, but that Parkland doesn't exist without the municipality. So what I mean is that so Halkirk, one of those two little places that doesn't belong to the system, if they join, they're actually signing an agreement, not with Parkland, not with the building here in Lacombe. They're signing an agreement with the other municipalities that are making up the system. We do not even countersign our own agreement because we don't exist apart from the municipalities. So even when it comes to a little later, when I talk about the budget, when I talk about anything that we do, remember it's all based on an agreement between the various municipalities that make up the system, not sort of some arbitrary building that fell out of the sky and landed in Lacombe that then operates a system library service. So the system board, again, one municipality gets to appoint a trustee, although you can have a trustee that represents multiple municipalities. Municipalities can appoint alternates to system boards because probably because of our budget. It's quite significant, but municipal boards cannot. Municipal trustees are all appointed by council, whether it's at a system level or a municipal level. And I noticed in the paper that you're actually trying to get somebody for the Mary Seymour Library Board. And the minister responsible for libraries can also make other appointments to system boards, although I don't know if the government has ever appointed anyone to a system board in living memory. So our board normally meets 4 times a year. Legislation only requires 3 times, but our master agreement says you'll meet 4 times. There are certain things that under legislation only the board can do, and that's approve policies, bylaws, the audit, our annual report, and our strategic plan or plan of service, which we have to review and file with the government at least one every 3 years. Municipal libraries have to do them once every 5. Then we've got our board meeting agenda for the year, and you can see that it conforms to the various things that we have to do to qualify for operating grants. File our annual report, an audit for the previous year, which is the one that we just did. We're going to be filing a 2022 report shortly. And then we have to approve a budget for 2023 to qualify for a grant this year, which we have done. So Parkland has an executive committee of 10, 9 of which are selected based on area representation in the region and a chair who's voted in annually at our organizational meeting. And this is again allowed under legislation. We also have an advocacy committee composed of 11 very enthusiastic members. This is something that we realize not only do we need for Parkland, but also to assist our libraries, since many of them lack the expertise to be able to advocate effectively for their own service. And all committee appointments are made at our organizational meeting in November. So just a little bit more about our executive committee. Again, it's allowed under legislation when there are more than 20 members or 20 municipalities that make up a system. That we select them based on population and geography. We try to sort of put groups together into electoral districts. They meet under legislation a minimum of every 3 months, so 4 times a year, but really practically they meet about 7 or 8 times a year. And then they do a number of things where they oversee operations, they can move funds from our reserves between meetings. They review our investments annually, and they also conduct my performance reviews. So if you ever think I'm doing a terrible job, please complain to our board chair, who will take it to the executive committee. Our advocacy committee, they usually meet the same days as the executive committee to save on travel costs, and they develop and implement and monitor our advocacy strategy. Staff and board members from Yellowhead Regional Library, so that's the system to the northwest of us. They are actively participating in our advocacy committee ongoingly now. And that's because we cooperate an awful lot with Yellowhead Regional Library on any number of initiatives, and they're the second oldest of the systems. And in terms of their structure and governance, they're the closest to ours. And the other thing that we've done that I'll talk about a little bit later is we formed a provincial-wide advocacy committee related to related to really trying to have a unified voice when it comes to advocacy efforts for all of the public library community, and certainly, at very least, the 7 library systems, and you might remember them from the map. And right now, at this particular moment, our big thrust is trying to get more money out of the provincial government because, as I will demonstrate a little later, while we're very appreciative that we were not having our funding cut for all these years, when it's been very difficult economic times for many different groups and individuals, the fact is that there hasn't been an increase in provincial operating dollars in quite a while. So these are the 6 goals for 2023. They're actually the same as 2022. So we want to position libraries to emerge advantageously in the provincial election. I already mentioned try to get a little bit more money out of the government of Alberta if possible. Again, we're very grateful we were not cut. Assist libraries with their own marketing initiatives, because particularly as we've tried to crawl out of COVID, libraries themselves are not doing a particularly good job of marketing their services, and we're trying to help them get their services back up to full capacity. And we want that unified voice for advocacy and to continue advocating basically with our own board, because they need to support our efforts, and continue to help libraries advocate with their own municipalities and stakeholders. We have a strategic plan, brand new one for 2023 to 2025. We are to help, the Parkland Board is to help its member libraries be effective advocates and promoters of sustainable library service. We want to deliver top-end training, because we know we need to help the library boards and their staff be more effective. And this has been quite a difficult period for municipal libraries, since they've seen about a 40% turnover in staff over the last 2 years. So in many ways, we're having to keep re-educating on the same things again, just to try to get the standard level of service back up. And then to help the libraries operate in a collegial environment, because honestly, the libraries are independent, but we know that we all can do things more effectively and cost effectively if we're cooperating with each other at an optimal level. So it's actually a pretty significant strategic plan. But now I'm going to do something to try and get your attention, just in case this is not particularly interesting. But you should find this. This is the 2021 return on investment for the city of Lacombe. And so we're right now, as I said, we're trying to do our annual report statistics for 2022. So a new one of these will come out probably at our May board meeting. So this will be coming, a new version will be coming to you. But what we're trying to do is show that based on the population of 13,985 that Lacombe was invoiced on, we're trying to show you for that $119,000 that you paid into Parkland, and we are actually very grateful for that, how much of a return you're getting on that money. And so right there on this ROI, and I believe there's an actual print copy of this in your package, we're showing that right up there's over $15,000 in allotment that you get back from us. That's how Mary C. Moore purchases its materials. You have over $16,000 in a rural library services grant, which is money that I'll explain to you a little bit later, but it's money that comes to us from the government because of the county of Lacombe belonging to the system. And then we pass it through and give it to the libraries in the area. There's the allotment for Lacombe County, and just those 3 alone, that's over $35,000. Then you look at the computers that we purchase for libraries, and we pay for all the wireless equipment and everything associated with it, the software licensing, the SuperNet connection and the internet connection, which come to you because you've decided to belong to the system. That's another $23,000, more than $23,000. And then just as this is the idea of the volume of materials that your patrons in this community are using, when you have the items that are borrowed from other libraries. So in 2021, over 42,000 items were brought in to Lacombe Public Library from other libraries, both within Parkland and around the province. That average cost of over $15 each, almost 16, that's over $674,000. Then there are the digital items we purchase, and over 5,700 digital items. So this is ebooks, e-audiobooks that are borrowed by people in the community. They're quite a bit more expensive at $34, almost $35 each. That's over another $198,000. So when you look at the top there, when you go to the return on investment and you add up all those columns, that works out to $7.79 for each dollar you're investing. And then if you flip the page, that doesn't include all of the soft stuff, because what we're trying to do when we show you this ROI is demonstrate clearly in tangible dollar form things where you're getting money back for the money you're investing. That's just the back of that page. So just quickly talking about our budget, it takes us a long time to develop it. We'll probably start next month for the 2024 budget. It gets approved by the board in September. And then we have to have that budget before all member councils no later than November 1st, but we send it out in September because we do require, based on our member agreement, 2/3 of the municipalities representing 2/3 of the population to approve that budget. So our budget for this year, we did ask for a 20-cent increase from $8.55 to $8.75 per capita, and it did pass. But we'd also held the line at $8.55 per capita for 3 years. So this is the first year in 3 years. This is the fourth year, actually. Fourth year we've asked for an increase. And our total requisition based on budgeted estimate is a little over $2 million. So that's not our total budget, but that's what we're asking from the municipalities. And we're using the current Treasury Board figures for invoicing municipalities since the municipal affairs population lists were no longer being updated. Approximately 44% of our budget does come from the province, so we're very grateful for that. We get an operating grant of just under $1 million at $470 per capita. The Rural Library Services grant at over almost $430,000. That's money, again, that comes from the membership of municipalities that do not have a board, and we pass that money back on to the libraries at their discretion within those areas. And the per capita rates that we currently have were first introduced in 2015, and the Government of Alberta is currently using 2016 population figures for issuing its grants. Now, this is just another little thing that I wanted to show you. This is a return on the municipal levy. Very quickly, what you see is that at the very bottom on the right there, you'll see the $2,001,335. So that's what we're basing on budget, what we're receiving this year from municipalities. But when you go through the budget here, this is all stuff that we're providing one way or another back directly to municipal libraries. So again, the materials allotment, the Rural Library Services grant, a cooperative collection fund that we're using to augment the system-wide collection, technology purchases, the software that we have to license. So again, what we're trying to do is demonstrate in this document very clearly that of the money that we're collecting from the municipalities throughout the Parkland region, 98% of it is being returned one way or another to your library. So you think about it that way, it's actually the money from the province that's supporting, you know, my wages, the utility bills at Parkland, our own operational costs. This one is a chart that's prepared for by the Government of Alberta. And if we had time, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on one particular issue surrounding this. If you look at it, you'll see that Parkland's municipal requisition is the highest at $8.55 per capita. But along with Yellowhead, we're the only system in Alberta that does not charge or invoice library boards. So in all the other systems, they collect money from the municipality, then they collect money from the library boards as well, which when you go to that final column, and then there's the provincial operating grant calculated at $470, you'll see that Parkland is actually receiving the second lowest level of gross revenue next to Yellowhead. And the reason Yellowhead's been able to keep their requisition so low is actually because they've had such exponential population growth around Edmonton. So even though they haven't had to increase the requisition, the population going up, and it's all on a per capita basis, it still means they've been getting extra revenue. And I would love to know what you think. I mean, because I know that municipalities are always facing tough times. Would you sooner we started charging library boards, or is it better to keep the money coming just from the municipality? Because every time I bring this up to the board, they say, no, just charge the municipality, because if you start charging the boards, then all the library boards will do is go back and ask for more money from the municipality to pay the invoice to Parkland. Then very quickly, because everybody's interested in provincial funding, this is a history of operating grants in the government of within Alberta for public library service, and you can see the ebb and flow of those grants. Now, the thing about particularly the provincial government is that they do contribute significantly, about $35 to $37 million a year to public library service, but it is a municipal responsibility. It's governed by provincial legislation, but that is why municipalities generally bear the burden, the lion's share of the cost for public library service. If you go to 2015, you'll see that that's where the current population figures on a per capita basis were first put in, 555 for municipalities and 470 for systems. And then in 2017, the GOA started using the 2016 population figures. And that was actually promised under the Conservatives of Jim Prentice. They didn't win the election, the NDP honored it, and then that is the rate that we've had ever since then. We're almost done here. And so why all this stuff matters? Because we actually initiated something here. We were questioning how much does public library service as a whole cost throughout the region? Because our budget at Parkland is a little over $3.5 million in total with provincial operating dollars and municipal dollars. But we scanned the libraries. Now I have to tell you, this does not include any in-kind contribution, but we've calculated that in 2022, municipal library service for those 49 service points cost a little over $7 million. So that means that the 64 municipalities, the 6 reserves, and that whole population is getting library service, public library service, for about, what, $10.5 million or thereabouts, a little more. So that's what the total cost for public library service throughout Parkland is. And the other thing that is a bit disturbing, and it is why we are concerned, and I will put in a plug both to the province as well as to the municipalities. Please support your libraries if you can, because in 2022, based on the information we have gathered, 43% of municipal libraries in Parkland had a deficit budget. They had insufficient revenue to be able to support their operations, and so they were pulling on their own reserves. Have you got any questions?
Well, thank you very much for your presentation there. It's certainly appreciated. We'll start with Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. I do have a question actually, and it's interesting that you brought up Yellowhead because it reminded me of something. So before I was a city councillor, I was actually a school board trustee, and I do remember that the school division that I was with at the time had a relationship with Yellowhead, and they were doing school libraries as well. I'm just wondering if Parkland is into that at all, and if not, then why? Why would they be different than Yellowhead?
Well, actually, it's because it's a very good question. We had contracts with school authorities. Under the Alberta Libraries Act, school authorities can become full members of library systems. I believe that is the case in Yellowhead. We used to have, when I started, we did have school authorities that belonged, but they were not members like a municipality can be a member. They were receiving services under contract. There was one other system, the Shortgrass system, that also started providing some service to schools. But putting it simply, school authorities changed in many ways the way they were administering their school libraries. Actually, the Peace Library system does too. But the Peace and Yellowhead are the only ones that are left. In the case of Shortgrass, the school authorities simply found that they didn't want to have to pay the system bill anymore. And in our case, it was much the same thing. We used to have over 100 school libraries at one stage, but because of cost, they simply dribbled and dribbled off because we had to spend a certain amount of money in order to justify or to pay for the services we were providing. And it kind of hit that cost threshold where we could no longer provide the service at what the schools were willing to pay. And we discontinued it.
Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. You basically answered the question just now for me anyway. It's in regards to the new library up at the Burman University. Have you gone through it, taken a look at it?
I was on the building committee.
There you go. So you know exactly what has happened up there. A beautiful library. Is it part of the system? I believe it is not by the statement you just made, right?
Well, it's a little bit different because when I said that school libraries can actually be full members under the active library systems, I was referring to K to 12 schools. Berman is a post-secondary institution, and there's no provision for academic institutions to belong to take system service. And as far as I know, they never have. They could have under contract should they have wanted to, but they've never approached us. And I know the librarian there very well. They're also on a completely different kind of resource sharing platform. So what I mean is that within Alberta, there is a software called Relay. So if you're looking for anything outside of Parkland, you use Relay. And we have a whole network that is set up and paid for by the provincial government for resource sharing amongst public libraries. In the case of the academics, the post-secondaries, they have a completely different setup. It's called NEOS. And so they all share within the post-secondary community, which is totally different from the public library community. They also have a completely different cataloging and classification system. We use Dewey Decimal. They use Library of Congress, and that makes interfiling records somewhat difficult. So it's actually they are libraries, but they serve a completely different clientele and a different audience. And so no, there's never been a post-secondary institution that's belonged to a library system.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. The quick facts, that's really intriguing to see how many items are moving through your library. But I'm curious how this compares to other years. Is your system seeing a downturn in terms of usage, and nothing to do with COVID, just in terms of people are not using print items in the way they have in the past? So I'm just was curious what the strategy of your board is in terms of responding to different practices amongst people.
The Codex isn't dead. The Codex is just basically a book. That's what it's actually called. What we find is that e-content is something that people demand, but it became more of a niche market. So there are people who really like their e-books and e-audiobooks, and actually e-audiobooks tend to be used more now than e-books are, but it doesn't appeal to everybody. Even universities are finding that their students who all wanted electronic textbooks are now moving back to print textbooks. What we see in previous year when there were the lockdowns, that circulation overall had dropped to a little over 800,000 throughout the system. So where we are now, we're seeing that circulation overall is back to about what it was pre-COVID. I don't foresee ever a decline in public library use. But the one thing that does concern me a little bit is that we're seeing a leveling off. So we're, again, about 1.2 million items that are circulating, and that was what it was pre-COVID, but the population is slowly increasing. So what we don't want to see is a drop in the use of libraries, because we could have 300,000 people, and I'll come in a few years from now, Evan help me, and I'll say, yes, we've still got 1.2 million circulation, but that actually means there's a per capita drop, which is why we have a marketing person and we have advocacy work that we're doing, because a lot of people just don't know about the libraries in their communities, and they're not as aware of the services that they can get, because they're much more extensive than what a lot of people realize. So I hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you very much. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you very much, Ron Shepherd. I appreciate it. The library is an important part of my life and the members of my family, so it's interesting hearing it from an outside perspective, and it's been great. I appreciate you coming. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Great. So we will move forward on. There's no motion, just for presentation, correct? Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Next up, we have our Member of Parliament, the Honourable Ron Orr, MLA for Lacombe-Ponoka, is here in person to visit Council and discuss areas of mutual interest. thank you for attending. And as before, just push the button once the light is red. Everybody can hear you online and in the crowd. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good to be here. And yes, I did get your list of agenda items, have it right here, so we can address those as we go ahead. How much time do I have, just so that we stay on target here?
That's a great question. Is there a time limit?
So normally presentations are limited to 15 minutes, but I'm sure if council desires additional questions that I would imagine MLA Orr will be happy to go beyond 15 minutes, but I'll leave that to him.
Fantastic. Thank you, CAO Gowdy. So we'll work within 15 minutes and play it by ear beyond that.
Okay, I will try to keep to that. I do have some fairly extensive answers to the
Yes.
issues that you raised. So if you want more, I'm happy to give you that. So I understand the first one was the Lacombe Lodge, and it's something that's been sort of evolving for quite a few years, actually. So let me begin picking up from last September's meeting with you, and just begin by sort of addressing the broader context of where the province has been in terms of seniors housing generally, and then I'll speak directly to the Lacombe application, and then maybe we'll take questions on that one before I move on. So more broadly, the current term of government actually picked up after an NDP term of government, with very different points of view, of course. And our government essentially committed to restructuring the seniors housing strategy from what the NDP had proposed and had begun to move ahead on, partly as a cost consciousness effort, and quite frankly, very different points of view in terms of philosophy of how it should be approached. So the experience we encountered during the NDP regime was that the cost of providing facilities per door was rising dramatically. If I remember the numbers correctly from back in my opposition days, somewhere prior to that, about in the mid 200,000 per door to well over 900,000 per door. And quite frankly, not a lot of them got built. So our government basically committed to a complete review of how we approach seniors housing and how we provide it. The review was called Stronger Foundations, an Alberta strategy, 10-year strategy for seniors housing. And because that review was ongoing, there have been no new applications accepted in the province for facilities since 2020. We were elected in 2019, began the process, and then applications were held. I will confess that I think the government took a little longer than it should have to get this all rolled out and sorted out and figured out. But in the fall of 2020, so just last fall, the Affordable Housing Partnership Program was rolled out, and they were beginning to accept applications and move forward. So that brings us to the Lacombe application in particular. I did ask for a very extensive briefing and actually had a conversation, asked for a phone meeting, had a conversation with both the minister's office and the assistant deputy minister in the department so that I could get them both in the same room and get the same answers out of them. So I had that partly as a response to our September discussions here, and partly because I was a little bit, quite frankly, a little bit concerned. I hadn't heard prior to September much at all from the local community about it. I had heard several years back when I was in opposition, but hadn't heard much locally about it for at least a year. So anyway, the 2019 application was submitted. There's no question about that. That's confirmed for a $39 million redevelopment. Because of the broader context that I mentioned earlier, that application at the time was not approved, as I think you're probably aware. So then they were working through all of their strategy and planning and creating the Affordable Housing Partnership Program. Again, after September, I raised your questions quite a bit. The department did affirm that they're aware of Lacomb's need and Lacomb's concerns. And I believe on November 29th, a letter was sent to Councillor Connick, encouraging them to apply to the Affordable Housing Partnership Program. And intake 1 closed here in January. I think it was the 19th, something like that. But the application for Lacombe Housing was not submitted for that intake closing period. Not sure why, because again, I haven't had much conversation locally, either with the board or from you folks. But the department did express a little bit of surprise that there was no application received by that January closing. So the most important thing I can say, I think, in moving this whole thing forward is that there is a need to update the 2009 application or proposal in the context of the new Affordable Housing Partnership Program. It is changed. It is very different than what was in existence back between 2015 and 2019. As I said, it did take longer than I thought that it would to get there, or maybe should have even to get there. But there needs to be an application come forward on the new program, and that was the intent of the November 29th letter. The department also reminded me to say, and you probably know all of this, that there is also CMHC and Federal Municipalities Association seed money to deal with planning and things like that. But I don't know if you even need that. I mean, several years ago, I saw essentially completed plan. So I think you've already achieved that part of it. Probably don't need it. What they did say to me, though, in preparing a new submission based on the new plan, the Affordable Housing Partnership Program, is that you can use the information or the work you prepared for the CMHC application, if you've done it, and just include that, because it's very close to the same information, and they'll accept what you submitted to CMHC. So the encouragement is you've missed the January application, but the date for the next intake has not yet been set. And of course, now this is going to get complicated with an election looming. So they haven't actually set a date for the next intake yet. And I don't know if it's going to be before the election or after, but the advice was, don't worry about that. Get the material together, send it in, submit it, talk to the department. I will assure you they are there to try and help. Get the application in now or as soon as you can, so that when it is open, they already have it and they are aware of it. I mean, I've talked to them multiple times over the last few months. If you have it in there, as soon as they open it, it'll be ready. So I think that's the essence of that one. Yeah, I'll take any questions on that.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions on this topic they'd like to ask? Councillor Connick?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Doss. Yeah, just looking at an email chain here, Ron, we were told the next intake is March. So Lacombe Foundation Board is meeting at the end of this month to go forward with the strategy. I mean, the information was submitted some time ago. I don't know what happened and how this was before that January intake already. We had submitted plans long before then, but
well,
that's neither here nor there.
There was stuff in 2019, and they are aware of that, but they're telling me it has to be
Fair enough.
There was a couple of years of quite frankly, deadness there, and it's a new world, so.
No, and fair enough. I mean, the heads of departments have changed and there's
Yeah,
ministers
exactly.
and everything's,
Yep.
so we're aware of what needs to be done. I mean, we have the email chain here and,
Okay.
yeah, we were told March. So hopefully, well, again, we'll resubmit and
Yeah.
all I can ask is that, yeah, that you keep your ear to the grindstone on that and just say, hey, is there a new intake in March and have you seen it? And we'll go from there, I guess. But it's, yeah, the amount we're spending on maintenance for that facility is just atrocious. And I mean, it's just, yeah, as our population ages, this is going to be well, as you know, bigger problem as we go. So, but anyways, that's all I wanted to
Fair enough.
let you know about that. Thank you, sir.
And I will continue to be engaged with them. Like I said, I've had meetings with both the department and the minister's office. And as you said, there's changes of minister and staff and everything. So yeah, it's been very unstable. So.
Yeah, thank you. I think fantastic that now we have council pushing and aware of this.
Well, and I'll maybe make one further comment. I'm actually going to challenge the department. I wish actually that they had carboned me on the letter that was sent to you, Councillor Connick, because if I'd have known that was there, I would have connected and tried to make sure that it got in by January. I had no idea what was going on. I am going to challenge them to keep me carbon copied on it. I think they should, as the local representative. I should know what's going on. So, and I will keep pushing it. I mean, I have since September when this was raised, and I'll keep it up. So, okay.
Councillor Lucia.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess I want to thank you for challenging us to maybe bug you a little bit more. Like you said, you hadn't heard a lot from us. I was on the foundation board before Councillor Connick, and I would have thought that it was always out there, but maybe we just sometimes, it's a need that has been there for so long that we almost stopped talking about it. And yet during my term, we made that shovel-ready project so that there is a design and a proposal about how we would do this. But thank you for that reminder that we should maybe knock on your door frequently, even if it is just for a moment, to say, this is super important to our people. So, yeah.
It is helpful when I'm kept up to date on what's going on. I can push a little bit. So, fair enough. Yep.
Great. Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to the next topic then.
Okay, Alberta Healthcare Action Plan, I think, was the next one. I got a very nice memorandum from Minister Copping himself. I find him very engaged minister, quite frankly, maybe one of the better ones out of all of them. But there are a number of things that are actively happening. I think he's done a great job of really starting to make some significant changes. There are some broader changes that have happened with Alberta Health Services, of course, and also with the AMA contract being signed, and I believe the nurses contract as well being signed. So there are some positive vibes, I guess you could say, amongst the community there. The more immediate concerns, though, are to address some of the backlogs and shortages that are happening, and there are 4 things specifically that are priorities in the short term here. So they are improving emergency medical services, decreasing emergency department wait times, reducing wait times for surgeries, and developing long-term reforms to improve overall patient flow. So let's talk about the EMS response times, first of all. That's a huge issue. It has been all across province for the last year or so. I didn't like when they took away the local, in the areas where it existed, the local dispatch service. Then that got even worse because the number of calls increased dramatically over COVID. From the department side, that's often the fallback. While the calls increased so much, we couldn't implement as we wanted to. But the minister is doing a number of things to try and improve this and fix it. So the shared response program, you might have heard, was launched mid-January. And essentially what it does is it allows EMS dispatch to transfer non-emergency calls to a dedicated team of registered nurses, the 811 program. There are about 15 to 20% of EMS calls that come in that quite frankly can be triaged and just in the conversation, the dispatch can realize, so this isn't truly an emergency that demands an ambulance and a team of EMTs and an emergency room visit. There are other ways to deal with this. So 15 to 20% of those calls are just simply non-urgent calls, and they've been authorized to try and sort those out and direct them to the appropriate place. So some will be sent there. It should amount to about 40,000 non-emergency responses throughout the year. That opens up quite a few ambulance trips. But more than that, the issue of non-medical patient transfers for patients who are just being moved back to their home, being moved back to their seniors facility. The government used to do this various ways, including taxis. And at one point in time, there was one tragedy occurred in a taxi transfer, and because of that, AHS just simply shut it all down. It's simple risk averse, knee-jerk reaction, in my opinion. But the minister has mandated that they are putting in place policies. They're going back to alternate transportation methods, such as community shuttles, wheelchair access taxis, other local options for non-medical transfer patients. In other words, these are patients who don't have need for medical attention in the midst of transfer. They don't need an intravenous going on. They don't need oxygen. They just don't need it. So those transfers are going to be handled in a different way. Secondly, on that same subject, though, there are some non-emergency transfers, but that will still require some ES clinical services. So maybe oxygen, whatever. They just need a little bit more attention and care. In that case, they are putting together a fleet of non-emergency vehicles that will begin to move those, particularly in the Edmonton, Calgary area, which is where all the rural ambulances get sucked into and then can't get out. So those, both all of the non-emergent, but ones who don't need medical care and those who might need a little bit of medical care will be handled differently, but they will be handled separately from the paramedics. And this has all been done in consultation with the paramedics as well. They're on board with this. And that will remove approximately 44,000 calls a year that ambulances are not going to be forced into making. So that should help substantially. And then another step is that the EMTs, they are proceeding with the protocols and the authorization for EMTs when they arrive at a site to triage that somewhat as well, to decide that, you know what, maybe this person doesn't actually have to go to an emergency room. Maybe they can go to a clinic. Maybe they just need to, I'm not sure what the other options are, but there may be other possibilities where they could be taken rather than having to be taken directly to an emergency room to free up space in the emergency rooms. If it isn't really necessary that they end up in an emergency room, they could be handled just as well somewhere else. So those are steps to try and address the EMT issue and speed up the ambulance response times across the province, as well as the fact that they're putting additional ambulances and staff in place. In terms of reducing emergency department wait times, part of the Healthcare Action Plan is to address this really in two ways. One is to bring on additional healthcare professionals. That is a challenge across the country, across actually North America, to find additional healthcare professionals. So maybe you heard today, there was an announcement actually today in this regard. They've just funded 600 new bridging, nurse bridging training seats at 3 of the colleges in the province to basically provide 600 seats for a bridging program for foreign trained nurses, whether they're trained in Australia or Britain or Africa or wherever, a bridging program to move them into being able to function. I forget the exact numbers, some for RNs and some for practical nursing. It's a faster process to get nurses than starting from square one with new nurse training, especially for RNs. It's several years, so it's an attempt to fill that in. That bridging program will include funding for them up to $30,000, but for every $30,000 over 5 years, and for every $6,000 they receive, they have to sign a contract to stay and nurse in Alberta for a year. So up to 5 years that before they could even leave the province. If we train them, they have to stay here to work. And then the other part of trying to reduce the emergency department wait times is to address the issue of beds. There's always been the challenge of needing more beds in the emergency room, and the beds are full in the emergency room primarily because there's people in the rest of the hospital that should be moved on, and the process hasn't been moving those people out of bed so that they can move the emergency patients into the regular part of the hospital. So they're working on that, working on increasing home care. There's additional home care hours have been budgeted to help with that. Also long-term continuing care facilities, which we just talked about. There is some urgency to actually make some progress on that. So I think those are the key parts on emergency room wait times. The last piece is bringing down surgical wait times. Dr. John Cowell, the administrator now for AHS, has been tasked with increasing surgeries in underutilized hospitals, primarily rural hospitals. I mean, I've had conversations with bunches of doctors. I was in a meeting just 2 weeks ago in Red Deer with the doctors there. There are rural hospital facilities that are underutilized. And so to increase the utilization of those hospitals, primarily in rural areas, and then to increase the numbers of chartered surgical facilities across the province to increase the service for wait times. Part of the problem with underutilized surgical facilities that has been a real challenge to get around is staffing them and labor contracts. They'll only work certain hours, and after that it becomes extremely expensive to operate them. In many cases, they don't want to. They could run 2 shifts a day, but they don't want to. They won't. The contracts become an issue. So to a certain degree, using the rural underutilized facilities gets around those problems, and the chartered surgical facilities gets around some of those problems as well, so we can actually get more surgeries done. So I think those are the main pieces. There's a lot more work being done by Minister Copping in a whole bunch of areas in terms of long-term planning and things, but I think I'll leave those for now. Those are the current priorities that are being worked on immediately and actually being initiated in the last month or so. So I'll take questions on that one.
Any questions? Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. This is definitely an area that, obviously, besides the lodge, that we hear a lot about is just simply accessing a family doctor. And we're blessed in this community to actually have quite a few within the community. But of course, the service area is very large, so, because a lot of the neighboring communities don't have family doctors. So they're really, really stretched thin. And so I guess I'd like if you want to just sort of address exactly, what has the government identified as the problem as to why, more rural areas, and I would consider us to be rural because we service such a large rural population. Why is it that there is such a hard time attracting, rural doctors? What is the government doing to, to address that? Like, what have they identified as the problem, and what is the solution?
Yeah, no, that's a totally fair question. And I mean, there's every municipality in the province practically is working with, their medical professionals and trying to attract doctors. The reasons are multiple. Primarily, I think it relates to the experience that the doctors have. In a small rural clinic, they're on call all the time. In a big urban setting, quite frankly, they don't have to be. Maybe once, like 1 week out of 4, they'll have to be on call. That pressure and drain of always being on call is difficult. It's also the collegiality of doctors being able to sort of, I don't know, nurture, communicate, feed off each other, the energy, the encouragement of working with others doesn't exist very much in many of the small rural facilities. And so they tend to gravitate toward the urban areas. We don't have a shortage of doctors, particularly speaking in Edmonton and Calgary. It is the rural areas where the real problem is and where they don't want to come to. They just don't. Another part of it is quite honestly education. All of the education tends to have been in the big urban centers. They go there, they spend, I don't know, 8 to 10 years to become a doctor. And they're so rooted into those communities, they don't want to leave them. And quite frankly, their families don't want to leave them. The wives don't want to leave. A young family, a wife who's spent most of her life or maybe all of her life in the city can't imagine going out to some little hick town and living her life cut off from everything she knows that's secure and safe. Education for their kids is part of it. So all of these things factor in. So what have we done to try and address it? We've, a couple of years ago already, we committed a significant amount of additional funding to rural doctors, family doctors in smaller communities, 60 million a year, I think it is. We pay additional benefits for them. But to be truthful, the money hasn't bought the issues because of the other things that I mentioned. So one of the things that we're doing is that they are creating, is it 2 or 3? It's Grand Prairie, Lethbridge. I thought there was, no, I think it's Grand Prairie and Lethbridge, and then Red Deer is lobbying to also be included. To actually set up doctor education in those communities to try and get them out of just Edmonton and Calgary, because other jurisdictions have discovered that when they train doctors outside of those major urban areas, they tend to stay in the areas where they're trained. So hopefully that will help. So the extra money is there, but it isn't the only solution. The education piece, I think will be important. And then there's also the commitment to assist with medical education costs on the condition or with an agreement that they actually serve for a period of time in rural areas, with the hopes that they will become, connected into the community and begin to feel at home there and have a house and stay. So those are some of the things that we're doing for that. So.
Great, thank you. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you to Deputy Mayor Dallas. Quick question regarding our own hospital here. Has there been any indication that it may become one of the sites for surgeries?
Yes, I think that is certainly a consideration. I know at the last meeting I had with the Central Region Alberta Health officials, they're looking at pretty well all of the hospitals that have the facility to be able to do it. So I think that good possibility, and probably some local lobbying would be helpful. So.
So as a council, what would your recommendation be to us to improve our chances of that? To send a letter to the minister or something along those lines?
Actually, I mean, that probably not, actually. I think that will be more a decision of the Central Region AHS officials. Letters to them would be useful, even letters of inquiry. Will Lacombe be considered for this? What would be needed? What's lacking that might hinder it? Asking those questions of them. And then secondly, I think the most valuable thing will also be conversation with the doctors themselves, because the doctors are the people who actually, I don't know, push on this sort of stuff and have a lot of say on it. There may be some situations where they'll be hesitant because either they don't have experts with the expertise. Oh, that's another piece about that I meant to mention too, and it slipped my mind, about why doctors don't want to come to rural areas, because the reality of both personal interest and money for doctors relies on specialties. And specialists just don't have the population to support them in rural areas. And they all want to be specialists of some kind or other. And the idea of just being a general GP, quite frankly, isn't very popular anymore. That's the simple truth. So anyway, that also applies to your question, Councillor Gullickson. Will they be able even to do the certain surgeries in a region? If it'll depend a lot on the expertise of the doctors in the area. And a big challenge there is anesthetics. Even in Red Deer, the biggest block, the meeting I was at with the doctors there, the biggest block they have to be able to do more is the fact that they can't get enough anesthesiologists to actually help them do it. So it's going to be about enough professionals to make these things happen. Simpler surgeries can happen. Specialty stuff probably going to be harder to do. But with the right planning and the right staff equation put together, you know, some of the routine kind of stuff that gets done a lot certainly could be done, and it would take pressure off the other areas. So.
Great. I think that's all the questions for that section.
Okay, Alberta Provincial Policing. I have a really good 6 pages actually of details here. I won't give it all to you because we'll be here too long. This is an ongoing conversation, but before I dive into it, I just wanted to ask you, as council, knowing that you have a municipal police force of your own, what is your concern or interest in this question? You don't have the RCMP in Lacombe.
Go ahead, Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My concern, of course, is that what we'd be looking at is a decrease in rural crime, hopefully, based on additional staff and so on to serve the rural area. There wouldn't be any advantage to us as far as the city of Lacombe that I see to have provincial policing, but the advantage would be to reduce the amount of crime in the rural area around Lacombe.
That makes sense. Yeah. Anybody else want to chime in on that one? Okay. All right. So, yeah, I'll try and summarize this for you. This is a conversation that's been going on with the government since 2002. October, actually, of 2002 was the first time it was sort of publicly raised, although it was privately discussed quite a bit prior to that. And to be clear, our challenge is not with the individuals in uniform. They do the best they can. They work hard. But our challenge is that as a province, our contract is not with the RCMP. Our contract for for policing, for community policing, is with the federal government directly, not even the RCMP. And that creates all kinds of issues. for us. It creates limitations that are in that contract. It has prevented successive governments over the years, I would even say decades, from significantly improving provincial policing. It's just been an ongoing challenge. I mean, we used to have provincial police in Alberta until the 1930s recession, and Alberta was basically bankrupt, defaulting on loans, and in desperate situation, and gave up the whole thing to the feds under an agreement to help them with that. So some of the challenges that the contract with the federal government creates for us as a province is limited civilian oversight and governance to provincial policing. The policing contract and the RCMP are governed by federal legislation, federal regulations, and federal policy, not provincial. That's the bottom line. So it's limited in terms of what we can do to change it as a province to improve it. Recruitment and detachment staffing are a problem, and they're done at the national level, not the local level. They do it, they send us, they tell us, we have no involvement in that. The National Forensic Laboratory System is another serious challenge because the federal government maintains that national laboratory system, but they will only use it for the most serious of crimes, and for things like property crime, doesn't even seem to matter how serious it is, they refuse to process anything through it. So basically the RCMP have their hands tied and they really can't do much on property crime as a consequence of not being able to get forensic laboratory evidence. The RCMP and the federal government unilaterally signed a multi-year collective agreement with the RCMP, as you're probably aware. Neither the province nor any municipalities were even included at the table on that. It was just done without us. And I kind of like the Indigenous people's phrase, nothing about us without us. I think that the province and the municipality should have at least had the opportunity to participate in that agreement in some way, shape, or form, but we weren't. The federal government is reconsidering the future of the RCMP. So 2021, the Parliament released a report focused on community policing and the challenge that they have between offering community policing and national policing responsibilities. Recently, the Prime Minister's mandate letter to the ministers responsible has asked them to look into the whole situation. Some of the report that's come out is that the demand for contract officers outstrips the RCMP's ability to recruit and train. The under-resourcing of RCMP officers consequently is having an impact on the health and the mental well-being of officers. Federal policing responsibilities are being, in some cases, neglected because there's not enough officers, because they will say that they have to do community policing instead. But it cuts two ways because there are also situations where community policing is just simply not happening because the RCMP are actually doing federal policing responsibilities. They're out dealing with major stuff, and the municipalities are paying for community policing, and there's nobody there. They're not doing it because they're doing their other responsibility. They can't do both at once well, and so this is what the federal government is wrestling with, as well as the costliness of it. They're complaining that the government of Canada is not recovering all of its costs for contract policing. There are some fears that they may actually use that to try and up the download the cost even more of RCMP contract policing or community policing, which is contract policing, because they don't want the expense for it. Recent briefing materials from the Federal Minister of Public Safety states that there are growing concerns, of course, from the provinces, territories, and municipalities over the costs, over the shift in federal policing responsibilities versus community policing. There's a sense of reduced value for money on the contract policing. one size does not fit all, and the low levels of control and accountability over local policing. So there's a national conversation taking place on this across the country. Nova Scotia and New Brunswick have announced plans to examine a provincial policing model. Saskatchewan recently announced that they are taking the first steps toward that on their own. In May of 2022, British Columbia commissioned a committee of politicians from all parties unanimously recommended that BC replace the RCMP with a new provincial police service. None of this is going to be easy. It's going to be a challenge for every province, but it is a national conversation. It is something that has to happen, and there's a lot of interest to modernize and improve policing across the country, but with the limitations of a federal contract, it just really isn't possible to do that. So the province has begun to put a plan together on that. Our goal is to actually increase the number of frontline police officers and civilian specialists. If you've read some of the information that was put out, there's also a commitment to dedicated mental health specialists to deal with homeless populations and mental health people. So often they end up being caught in the justice system. We believe that a provincial police service will actually work better to recruit officers. There's been some work in Ontario, some changes recently that seems to have worked to that effect. Edmonton and Calgary seem to be able to find the officers they need. The federal RCMP's image is such that even the police union admits that they're getting significantly fewer applications even to work with them. So there's that challenge evolving as well. It'll reduce transfers of officers. Typically, Alberta gets officers in their first couple of years, and then they want to get anywhere else except here. They want to get back east. They come from Quebec, they come from Ontario, and they want to go back home. So there's lots of different challenges that I think can be met. In addition to all of that, the commitment to First Nations policing would be part of our plan. So the province believes we have to at least be engaged in the conversation. We have to at least be prepared for the possibility that the feds, our contract expires in 2023. With the conversation that's going on, nobody knows what contract policing is going to look like by 2023. And there's a good possibility the federal government would just say, we're not renewing this. So we should at least be thinking, planning, preparing, and anticipating that that is a very real possibility. I mean, the feds have been doing their research on it already. We're committed to researching that, trying to put together a plan, try to make it happen in a way that would be best for Albertans. Our ultimate goal is to improve the service levels, to address the crime, and try to make a better police service for Alberta. There's a number of initiatives that have been taken already by the government in the last couple of years, so I'll just list some of them quickly. 20 million to expand drug treatment courts, which helps with the justice system. 207 million for the new Red Deer Justice Center. 50 new Crown prosecutors hired. The creation of the Rural Alberta Police Integrated Defense Response, which is rapid, and also the ALERT, Alberta Law Enforcement Response Teams. Indigenous policing, 15 new officers, community policing grants, and other things with the Indigenous peoples. We've created the Alberta Parole Board away from the federal government. We just amended the Police Act. You're probably aware of that. So we just feel that it's a responsibility of the government to explore what alternative policing models might look like, what they might cost, how they would operate, what it would take to get them up and running. Especially in light of the contract potentially expiring in 2023 or likely radically changing. We want to be able to make a transition on our terms, not on something that the federal government hands down to us for their advantage that we haven't thought through and we're not prepared for. So that's really what's driving us. There has not been a final decision made yet, but I will say that the Price Waterhouse Coopers review made it fairly clear that an Alberta Provincial Police Service is at least realistic, cost-effective, and worthy of further consideration. So in terms of trying to basically preserve value for money for Albertans, that's where we're going. It's an ongoing provincial and national conversation that we're not through having yet, and we still have a few years to work toward. But that's where we're at. So questions?
Councillor Connick.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. Just further to Councillor Gullickson's comments, yeah, we're concerned because rural crime, they don't, the criminals don't suddenly stop at the borders of Lacombe and say, oh, we better not go in there. Rural crime knows no boundaries, so it does affect us.
Correct.
But we do have a very outstanding 24-hour police force here, and it's not much of an issue. I guess my concern is, and this, my takeaway of, and my other councillors can either agree or not agree, but at the latest Alberta Municipalities Conference, there was a sense that there are many in the room who do not want to lose their RCMP. And so I guess the fear is that you talk about how the federal government doesn't consult with the province or just does their own thing. The fear, I think, is that we hope that the provincial government will consult with municipalities, because we're the ones that are, not us, of course, so much, but, talk to the municipalities and see what they need and what they hope to see in Alberta Provincial Police Force, and not just kind of, adopt what the OPP does. So that must work here. And then, that's the key thing. That was the takeaway. I hope that the provincial government will, going forward, consult with the municipalities, especially bigger ones like Red Deer that have, what are they going to do? I mean, it's a big undertaking. I hope they just talk to the municipalities involved.
No, and that's totally fair comment. And I think that the government has become aware of that. I think there's three sort of real reasons for the hesitation on the part of municipalities. One, of course, is the unanswered questions about money. What's the cost sharing? That certainly has to be part of the conversation. Another one, of course, is just the nostalgic memory of the guys on horses with Red Surge. There is a sentimental value there for some people. And then the other one is just purely the practical, logistical, administrative challenges of setting it up. It's a big job, and there's a lot of questions to be answered. There are a number of municipalities, Grand Prairie in particular right now, looking at doing what you guys have had for years, because they're frustrated with the way things are, and there's a couple of other communities exploring it. But my sense is that the absolute best thing that should happen is that the province should step up, take responsibility, create both a legislative framework and a policy framework that would then be something that municipalities could adopt, and everybody isn't stuck inventing the wheel themselves. I think it should be a group effort, and everybody should work together on it. But I do think that the minister and the department are aware of the need to consult, and that will continue to happen. Part of the challenge that we will have is that part of the conversation is that, as you know, there are, I think it's 7 communities already have their own force like you do, Edmonton, Calgary in particular. So really the issue of RCMP community policing is a rural Alberta conversation. And it probably needs to be held mostly with those communities that are impacted, that are going to be facing the reality of change. Because I mean, quite frankly, as you said here, and Edmonton, Calgary, Lethbridge, Camrose, whatever the other ones are, apart from the rural surroundings, there's not going to be an intense immediate impact on them. So, it needs to be held with the communities that are going to be deeply impacted by it. So, fair enough.
Great, thank you. Any other questions here? Okay. Well, then I think we'll wrap up this presentation. Appreciate it. MLA Orr, it was a pleasure having you in council chambers today. We always appreciate your commitment, transparency, and integrity you've brought to the position. On behalf of council, I would like to thank you for your long tenure serving the residents of the Lacombe-Panoka region. And serving your peers as an elected representative is a significant responsibility, and we appreciate your time representing our city and region at the legislature. Your time as an MLA and Minister of Culture shows our region has an important role to play in Edmonton, and council appreciates your efforts to benefit Central Alberta. Once again, thank you for your commitment to our residents. I'm sure the city of Lacombe will continue to benefit from your advocacy, and we wish you, Donna, and your whole family the best as you move into the next chapter. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it has been a true privilege, real learning experience. I've enjoyed almost all of it. COVID didn't help. And if I was 10 years younger, I'd probably stay for another term because truthfully, it has been a true privilege and honor. So thank you. And unless you have me in the next 2.5 months, I guess this will be the last opportunity. So thank you. And thanks to you for your service in your community as well. And God bless. Thank you.
Have a good night. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Well, that wraps up presentations. No public hearings this evening. And so we are moving into section 6 for request for decision. Item 6.1, Federal Census Results Report, will be presented by Senior Officer McLaughlin. Fantastic. When you're ready, thank you.
Good evening, members of council. So I am here to provide you another synopsis of the 2021 federal census. So this is the third time you're seeing me for this particular topic. So the first time I was here, we presented in September in regards to the population demographics of the age and gender of Lacombe. In November, I presented the housing profile and family structure. And today I'm going to present on the immigration and diversity of Lacombe. And we have one more future report to come forward about education and income in the next few months. So the city of Lacombe regularly welcomes residents who have chosen to make Lacombe their home. So the chart on the screen shows where Lacombe's community members lived 5 years ago. So this would be from the 2016 federal census. So in 2016, 29.4% of Lacombe's residents did live outside of the community. And so that results in a migrant population of 3,620 individuals coming to Lacombe. And there are 3 types of migrants. We have intra-provincial migrants, which are shown in orange on the chart. And these are the individuals of Lacombe who've come to Lacombe from other areas of Alberta. We have inter-provincial migrants, which is shown in light blue at the end of the scale, who are individuals relocating from other parts of Canada. And the last stream is external migrants, shown in light green. And those are individuals who have relocated to Lacombe from outside of Canada. So Lacombe's location along the CNE Trail and superb farming conditions did lead to a broad range of settlers within Lacombe. And historically, immigrants from Eastern Canada, Europe, the United States, and China have settled in Lacombe. They came with the passage of the Homestead Act, the construction of the CP rail, and the Edwardian boom in the early 1900s, and later the post-Second World War boom in the 1950s. So the 2021 federal census did ask individuals to identify if they identified as immigrants. And of the 13,070 responses to that question, 1,555 Lacombe residents did identify as immigrants, with 460 arriving or gaining citizenship between 2016 to 2021. So that's the last bar in orange, yellow, orange on the graph. We can see that between 2001 and 2010 and 2011 and 2015, that nearly the same amount of immigrants arrived in that 15-year period as they did between the 5-year period in 2016 2016 to 2021. So there was a significant increase of immigrants in the last 5 years. Of the Lacombe residents who responded as immigrants, the majority identified as their birthplace of the Philippines, followed by the USA, the UK, and the Netherlands at varying percentages. There's 3 streams of immigration when it comes to Canadian immigration. We have economic immigrants, and these are individuals selected for entry into Canada based on their ability to contribute to the Canadian economy, and includes their ability to meet labor market needs, capacity to own, manage, or build their own business, and make substantial investments into the Canadian economy. That's the largest percentage shown in the darker green at 61.3% in Lacombe. We have immigrants who are sponsored by a family. So these are Canadian citizens and permanent residents who sponsor these individuals to facilitate family reunification. That's shown in the light blue. And then the smallest percentage of immigrants that we have are refugees. And so these people are granted a permanent resident status based on a well-founded fear of returning to their home country, including fear of persecution for such reasons as race, religion, or nationality. The 2021 census also asked individuals to identify various languages that they speak. And so of the 13,080 people who responded to this question, 30 individuals indicated that their first language was neither French nor English. Unfortunately, the census didn't identify what language these 30 people spoke. However, it does show that the most common languages that were indicated on the census were French, Spanish, Dutch, German, Hindi, Ukrainian, and Arabic. So religion has played a significant role in Lacombe's founding and continued growth. Lacombe has approximately 19 churches, which have a rich history dating back as far as 1894. The 2021 census results showed that 58.1% of Lacombe residents indicated their religious beliefs were of the Christian faith. And the Christian faith is included with 15 various denominations, such as Christian, Catholic, United, Reformed, Anglican, Baptist, and Jehovah's Witness. The next highest religion was no religion at all. So 39.9% of people who responded indicated that they had no religion. We can see in the charts on the screen that religion has changed significantly since 2001. So the amount of people who have no religion has increased. And then we can see in the bottom chart the various religions that may or may not have been in Lacombe in 2001 that exist now, or existed in 2001 and don't exist any longer, or were not responded to on the census. In regards to the increase in no religion, it increased from 1,890 people in 2001 to 5,225 in 2021. So the census also asks in regard for people to indicate their Indigenous status. So Indigenous peoples does refer to three groups: First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. However, within each of these groups, they are tremendously diverse. And this diversity is reflected in over 70 Indigenous languages, which were reported in the 2021 census. And we can see that there has been a slight increase since 2011, 2016, and 2021. And so overall, census data has revealed that the Indigenous population grew at a pace which far surpasses that of the non-Indigenous population. And they indicate that there's 2 reasons for that. The first being natural growth, which relates to a higher birth rate and increasing lifespan, and also response mobility, which refers to people who once responded to the Indigenous identity questions one way, but now respond to them differently. And so generally, over time, respondents who had previously not identified as Indigenous have become far more likely to do so. This may have been a result of personal reflection, social factors, or external factors such as changes to legislation or court rulings. So what this information means for the city of Lacombe is that it does provide basic information about our diversity, about the population, but may not fully illustrate the different needs of Lacombe's evolving demographic. And so we should always keep in mind what we can do to better communicate to be available if residents have access to the assistance that they need, particularly if they've relocated from a different country with a different government stream, and the possibility of incorporating different cultural traditions into community festivals. And so we did have a conversation with Lacombe FCSS in regards to some of these future information needs. And so with the turmoil that's happening in Ukraine right now, FCSS did translate applications into Ukrainian for refugees coming to Lacombe. They also had translators on site to assist families to fill out applications for subsidy program. They also assisted families in selecting and signing up for summer programs in the community. They also assisted new immigrants one-on-one to help them navigate the programs and social assistance that were launched specifically for Ukrainian families and individuals who landed in Canada. And they connected new immigrants to the Lacombe Ukrainian Support Group. So the FCSS did do this, and it is something that we should keep in our mind. Thank you, and I welcome any questions.
Great, thank you for presenting. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. So I have a comment and a question. One was relating to the languages spoken in homes. If I say it correctly, it's interesting that the Filipino population is the highest immigrant population, but yet their language is not listed as a language that's spoken in homes in Lacombe. I just thought that was an interesting contrast, so that's just a comment. Were you going to say, okay. And then I had a question about your very first, or your second slide. 3,620 individuals lived outside of our community in 2016. I don't know why those numbers, I'm not understanding that over 3,000 people didn't live here. Like, are you saying from 2016 to now, we have 3,000 new people? This is on slide number 3.
Through Deputy Mayor Dallas. So it would be, yes, so this is a 2016 number, so it's the 5 years prior. So the 2021 numbers will come out in the next federal census. So in 2016, 3,620 individuals identified as moving to Lacombe in that 5-year period is how I understand the data to read.
Thank you. Any other questions in regards to this? Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. Again, just a comment, I think, and only just because I just happened to be looking at this information based on a conversation that I was having recently. I did look up immigration statistics, I guess, for lack of a better word, somewhat recently. And so I just thought it was worth noting, because I don't believe it was in the memo, and I apologize if it was. But so our immigration was mentioned that it was primarily coming from the Philippines, but then next after that was like a lot of USA and European countries, which is actually different than the national. The national has a primary immigration inflow coming from the Philippines, yes, but not primarily. It's from Asia. So I just thought that was interesting, just as a comment, that we are unlike, the country as a whole, for the most part, that we're kind of unique here in who we're attracting. So I just thought that's just a comment, no further comment on it, but other than just to bring that to attention.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Koenig.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. I will make the motion then that council accept the City of Lacombe Community Diversity Report as information.
Fantastic, thank you. We'll wait for that to show up on our screens here. Thank Thank you, Senior Officer McLaughlin. Appreciate it. It was fantastic having you here, and this information is greatly valued. Okay, that's all 5 in, unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, apologize. Next item on our list is 6.2 report on census presented by Director Piche.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas, and good evening, Council. This evening, I'm bringing forward a request to conduct a municipal census in 2023. The last municipal census occurred in 2019, where the population was counted at 13,985 residents in the city of Lacombe. In 2021, the federal census counted the city's population at 13,396 residents, which is a difference of 589 residents less. But no matter what, Lacombe is growing fast. From 2019, since the last census, there have been 317 new developments, which have included some larger multifamily dwellings. Even according to the Alberta Treasury's branch, the OWL, Lacombe is the 10th largest or fastest growing city in Alberta. Shortly after the 2019 census season, though, the government of Alberta announced that it would change the way it determined population in Alberta. They repealed the determination of population regulation in 2020 and created a population estimation model using federal statistics. When the federal numbers came out in 2022, there was concern expressed by many municipalities that their population was not being properly reflected. The government of Alberta did listen and is now allowing municipalities to report their own population numbers again. The new census regulations are still to be released. However, it is anticipated that they will be ready for the 2023 census season. One of the reasons that it is so important to ensure that every person is counted is for grant funding. There have been a number of changes to grants and how they are dispersed. As we have this year, the MSI grant is changing to the Local Government Fiscal Framework Grant. And although the LGFF formula has not been finalized yet, the old MSI grant was based on a combination of population, school requisitions, and kilometers of roads. At this point, the grant impact on the city's budget is approximately $103 per person. This is less than the past years, so it is very important that every person is counted. In anticipation of conducting a census, included in the 2023 budget was $40,000 to do so. So there'll be no more ask, there won't be an ask for any additional funding. However, should council move forward with the census, the city of Airdrie is offering their census software to municipalities again. It worked very well for the last 2 censuses we did, and we would anticipate using it again. The effectiveness of this software is that it allows the residents to complete the census on their own. It integrates with GIS mapping, so we have a very accurate addressing system. It allows for on-the-fly updates for addresses in the event that we find new secondary suites appear, and it has real-time updates so we can tell when residents have been completed. So tonight, administration is recommending that a council does conduct a census in 2023, and that council designates April 4th, 2023 as Census Day in the city of Lacombe. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them at this time.
Great, thank you, Director Piche. Councillor Konik.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. So I understand that when we do the census, the provincial government will recognize those numbers as being appropriate. Will the federal government do the same, or will they still rely on their census numbers of 2019, or will they recognize our census?
That is a good question. I will have to find out. I'm sorry, I did not look into the federal responses there.
I know the funding, sorry if I may follow up, I know the funding we get from the federal government is nowhere near what we get from the provincial government, but I'm just curious about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. Just a couple of questions. So I do remember that last time, and it does mention it in the memo, that we just did ask the simple question, how many are in the household? Is that again the idea that we would just be simply asking the one question and not any others?
That is what was anticipated. However, it is up to council should you wish to ask other questions.
So my follow-up question to that is, I don't have any things springing to mind, but I was just curious if administration, I assume not because it wasn't included in the memo, but is there anything that administration would think would be useful to ask? I'm hesitant to just ask something just for the sake of doing it, but if there was something that was actually useful for the municipality to know, that would be the time.
I don't have anything at this point. However, CIO Gowdy, do you?
We did talk about the opportunity to ask additional questions. We didn't have any that came to mind immediately of like, well, this would be a great time to check on X or Y. But certainly we're open to that if there is something.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. I am ready to make the motion that council conducts a census in 2023.
Okay, fantastic. We'll have that on the screen here. Okay, all 5 votes unanimous. And any follow-up motions? Councillor Hoekstra.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. I will do the follow-up motion that council designates April 4th, 2023 as Census Day in the city of Lacombe.
Great, thank you. And again, we'll wait for that to display on our screens. Fantastic, another unanimous vote. Good work, everyone. Next up, we have item 6.3. Oh, sorry, and thank you, Director. Appreciate it. Next, 6.3, Lacombe Athletic Park Association lease amendment. Director Lapointe.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor Dallas and Council. This evening, administration is presenting a request from the Lacombe Athletic Park Association to access additional municipal land to accommodate their planned track and field expansion. Further part of that request is also to establish a dialogue with the Wolf Creek School Division to increase the park area contained within the existing lease agreement. As you know, the Lacombe Athletic Park Association is committed to installing the highest track and field certification possible for their upcoming expansion project, that being IAAF Class 2 track. I won't say that too fast. The group has worked with Scott Builders to ensure the requirements of the certification are met. And by taking these steps, Lacombe Athletic Park Association will qualify to host such events as the Alberta Senior Games and Provincial Championships. Several iterations of the plan were developed, considered, and reviewed before presenting their final concept to Council on January 9th of this year. And this newest concept requires additional land to the east of the current park. This will require the removal of trees, although the Parks Department has confirmed that many of these trees are moving towards the end of their life cycle and will require increasing maintenance over the next few years. Lacombe Athletic Park Association recently submitted a community facility enhancement program application that was unsuccessful. The review feedback provided indicated that the project will not be considered until all resources are in place to complete the project fully. To support the association's next grant application, administration recommends that council agree in principle to provide the additional municipal land required for the track and field expansion, and to authorize administration to open discussions with Wolf Creek School Division to review the proposed lease agreement revisions to increase the park area as presented. With that, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Director Lapointe. I guess we'll go around and check with other councillors before I speak on it. Okay, Councillor Koenig.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. Have we had any sort of preliminary discussions with Wolf Creek, given that the vast majority of this land that we're looking for is actually within their purview, or not? Not as of yet, or
not to this point, but there is a joint council meeting that is planned for March 2nd. So there'll be an opportunity to bring it up at that point.
Okay, thank you. I guess for myself, just pending some discussions in regards to the right of way. Just my personal experience working in these areas is sometimes repairs can be costly, especially with specialized equipment like this. Do we have concerns about issues with that?
I would say that additional research will have to be conducted by LAPA at this point. They've committed to that. And so, yes, I would share those same concerns, and we want to see the results of that information before committing any further.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hibbs.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. Not to kibosh further questions, but I'd just go ahead and move that council agree in principle to provide the additional land required for Lacombe Athletic Park Association's track and field expansion.
So I guess just for my personal benefit on this, this is just kind of preliminary discussions and just work out feasibility of it and see how, okay. Fantastic, thank you. Okay. Yeah, principal. Any follow-up before we vote? All right, we'll put that on the screen. It sounds quick and easy on that one. Okay, that one passes yes unanimously. So thank you, Director Lapointe. Next up, we have section 7, which is notices of motion.
Do you need the second one?
Oh, second motion. I apologize. Returning back to Lacombe Athletics Park, Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. I'll move that council authorize administration to open discussions regarding amendments to the city's leases with the Wolf Creek School Division and the Lacombe Athletic Park Association to provide for an increased leased area as presented.
Great, thank you. Any follow-ups in regards to that motion? Okay, should be displaying on our screen shortly. All right, unanimous, thank you. Thank you again, Director Lapointe. Great second half. Okay, moving forward, item 6.4, we brought an item out of consent agenda, and that was the Lacombe Public Library board minutes, November 22nd. Councillor Hoekstra, would you like to speak on this?
Yes, thank you very much. This is under the minutes 6.1, the Kinsman Room update. It says there that the monthly lease payment will be $25,000. And so I just was questioning whether that is a correct amount.
So, Director Lapointe, do you want to just give the correct amount on that?
Yes, it should be $25,000 annually, not on a monthly basis.
Okay, thank you. And I am on the library committee, so I will inform them of the minutes on that and see if we can get an update on that. Thank you. Okay. Do we need a motion to accept that as information then?
Yes, we do. We actually have a suggested motion, if you want council support to carry that request forward. That would be that administration contact the Lacombe Library Board to clarify the wording on the November 22nd, 2022 Library Board Minutes, Section 6I, Kinsman Room update to read yearly lease payments will be $25,000. And that would just make sure that when you carry it forward, they know you have the full endorsement of council as well.
Sure, yes, I would suggest that. Councillor Hoekstra, please repeat that.
Thank you, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I will make that motion.
Okay, I'm going to read it one more time. Oh, he's got it. Just note that it's $25,000 yearly.
Thank you, CAO Gowdy. Okay, fantastic. That's unanimous. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Moving out of request for decision, now we're in notice of motion. Councillor Gullickson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Dallas. I have a notice of motion and it reads, I move that that City Council directs administration to investigate the costs of doing a study on the impact that the vibration of the trains passing through Lacombe at high speeds has on our historic downtown and return the matter back to council for consideration.
Great, thank you. So for this, we just wait for voting on the motion. That is all.
Actually, it is just a notice this evening of a motion that will be considered and voted on at the
Okay.
next meeting for council.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Councillor Gullickson, for that. All right. Councillor Hoekstra.
I make a motion that we move in camera. Is that not next? Yeah.
Yep. Fantastic. We'll wait for that to display on our screen. Councillor Gullickson and Koenig. Okay. Thank you. Motion to move in camera at 7:26 p.m. All right. Let us know when we're